legislators, including the governor's office. I know there's a governor's race who's pretty close to a couple of those folks. There's no connection that helps you with your representation on county issues up there. We have some really good legislators up there, Shanford Silva, Tom Daly, and so forth. But on county issues, they really can't make the connection. I know that sounds funny, but that's just the way it is and has been for several decades now. The 4th District, Anaheim is one of the biggest anchors. It's west and central and southwest Anaheim is part of the 4th District. It's also La Habra, Brea, Placentia, Buena Park, and Fullerton. And out of those northern cities, west and central Anaheim is very, very important, and they're kind of the anchor. The Anaheim area, doesn't include Anaheim Hills, and Fullerton are two of the biggest areas in there. Obviously, the #1 priority we have to deal with is the homeless crisis and figuring out transitional housing, affordable housing, and getting housing for those folks who are displaced currently and help out. A couple of folks on my team right now were homeless for a part of their lives. They know the issue intimately, they know it very, very well, and we're looking at it from a perspective, and not just our friends, brothers and sisters who are displaced. We're looking at it as a homeowner, we're looking at it as a business owner, we're looking at it as those people who look at the homeless issue as a crisis. This is a health and safety crisis, and every time I meet with an elected official, they tell me it's not me, it's the state. It's not me, it's the city. It's not me, it's the county. And I look at the homeless crisis as I would look at any major incident, whether it was a firestorm or a mass casualty event. I look at the homeless crisis as something that needs a whole bunch of people getting together to have a unified command on the local, county, state, and federal level to deal with it. We're spending 10 times more by indirectly not dealing with the issue than we would if we were just directly fix the issue and help those folks. Some of those folks, as you know, are veterans and have PTSD, and they're not going to a shelter. They say, Joe, I'm not going to go to a shelter. I will not be enclosed. I've got 3 brothers who are veterans. One was a Navy SEAL, and they all have PTSD. I get it. Every one of my paramedics who retired had PTSD, so I understand where they're coming from. Folks down there also have, they're victims of the opioid crises. Some of them are IV drug users, and some of them are just families that got caught up in the Great Recession. And they were a couple of paychecks away from being out there, and there they are just looking for a break. It's really hard to get back on your feet if your identification card or your driver's license is no longer valid. Nobody's going to take an interview with you if you don't have that. If you don't have your vehicle anymore, if you don't have the ability to shower, the ability to just get not a hand out, but a helping hand back up. It's #1 issue. Affordable housing is hand in hand with that. And of course, working with communities is going to be a priority for me. And then public safety. After the Great Recession, you may not know it, but a lot of departments, including Anaheim, including Orange County Fire Authority and everybody else, they started cutting staffing. Well, a lot of those jobs never came back. So when the Thomas fire hit, LA County was down 92 engines that were broken. We were down at least 20 engines in Orange County that we made the fire chief staff up after our previous firestorms. And firestorms have a huge adverse impact on the economy. We close rail lines, we close schools, we close businesses, we displace people. And we've been doing this for decades. The fastest recorded fire in the world, when I was a young firefighter, was a gypsum fire in 1982, October in Anaheim Hills, 1,000 acres an hour. Now it is not unusual, 35 years later, to have a dozen fires going simultaneously at 2,000, 3,000 acres an hour. And we don't have the staffing for it. We have 300 on-duty people for 1.7 million people. 300 for 1.7 million folks. That's not adequate. So, and a lot of that, the reason for that, and a lot of the reason we're plagued with these problems, in my opinion, is because a lot of our money goes to Sacramento and stays in Sacramento. It's been that way for years, and nobody's really addressed it. When Lou Kerr was a senator, he tried. He brought back an extra $50 million, and that went away when we had to renegotiate the vehicle license fee because other folks in other counties, whether they're Dems or Republicans, they didn't want Orange County to get their fair share because a lot of folks in the state still including until he got reelected, Governor Brown didn't realize Orange County isn't as red as it used to be. This district went for Hillary Clinton. This district went for Barack Obama. You know, we wrote speech for then Senator Obama to bring to the International Association of Firefighters back in Washington, D.C., so he could be that public safety icon. And he did pretty well. And halfway through the speech, he kind of made a veer towards Iraq, and I asked his team, I said, what happened? They go, well, the senator quit smoking last night, so he's a little bit distracted today. So he's not going to be following your speech, Joe. So anyway, right now we have really good support from labor, working men and women in this community. We have all the firefighter associations in Orange County have backed me. We have a lot of great Dem groups that are backing us, a lot of folks that are working with us. And I'm just here to have a conversation, and hopefully you have some questions I can answer for you. By the way, the seat is winnable. For the first time in about 40 years, the seat is now a Democratic leading seat by 8 points. 8-point Democratic advantage. And so we can win this seat. The #1 fundraiser, young Kim was in and she decided to run for Congress. And so we reached out to the Korean American community. My wife is Korean. And they endorsed my campaign on Monday. Since young Kim we now have the Korean American endorsement as of Monday. It's very important because North Orange County, especially Buena Park and Anaheim, have the second largest Asian Pacific Islander community in Orange County, next to Vietnamese in Garden Grove, Westminster, and Buena Park and Fullerton has very large Korean business groups and so forth. So we're very proud of that endorsement. So we're proud to be here today. If I can answer any questions for you about the race, Westminster.
Well, the largest employer in Orange County is the Mountain.
Yes, sir.
And with cast members receiving now between 11 and 12, 15 hours, an average apartment
Yes.
being $1,600 a month, or you would need following 30% of $26.
I don't know what we're doing.
Rent an apartment.
Where do you
We
want
got a
to
little problem there.
Math doesn't work.
That doesn't work.
Yeah.
What can we do about that?
Well, on the way here, Claudia was giving us some great ideas as far as affordable housing. Right down the road here up the road on Lincoln Avenue, we passed by some affordable housing that's actually beautiful apartments. $25,000 a year is what you need to make or less to qualify in there. And it would normally be a $1,650 apartment. And there are families and so forth qualifying for that. So we have folks on our team that know what affordable housing is and what it looks like, because that's the problem I have. We have union folks and Disney folks that are living on the riverbed. They're employed. They work for the County of Orange or they work for Disneyland and they're living on the riverbed because of the math you just gave me. If I make $10 an hour and I get $300 a week after taxes, that's $1,200 a month, and the average rent, as you said, $1,500, $1,600 a month. How are you going to buy a car? How are you going to pay for insurance? How are you going to pay for food? You need to have 2 or 3 people living in the same apartment or whatever. Something we're going to have to address, but I think the biggest issue on that is affordable housing. But the County of Orange isn't far behind Disneyland as far as not being a good employer. And sometimes, as goes the county in the manner in which they treat their people, so goes private employers outside here. Because we just marched with some folks who are healthcare workers at Fountain Valley Hospital, right? And they're given a couple of $100 a month for healthcare. Well, where are you going to buy healthcare for $200 or $300 a month? They work at a hospital and they can't afford healthcare. And as we talked about before, this is upside down. When I was growing up, we had a Helms Bakery truck in La Habra, and he owned a house. He owned a house. He drove a Helms Bakery truck. Somewhere along the line, there's a huge disconnect in what we pay our service workers, our service employees, and what it costs to live in Orange County. And I get we're very densely populated. We're the 5th largest county in the nation. We're the 3rd largest county and the largest state in the union. Something's got to be done. So one of the priorities is affordable housing, because that is a direct corollary to homeless. And thank you for bringing that up. You're very correct, yes, sir.
You mentioned the riverbed. How would you address that issue? So compounding day by day that it's even out of the reach of the government. The government doesn't seem to know what to do. And what they are doing is wrong. By chasing
Right, so the question is, the riverbed, what would you do about the riverbed? So I've been down there several times, we've been with, I'll get you in a second. What I thought was, when I first went down there several months ago, that everybody was in one size fits all. We're all here for the same reason. Not even close, right? Not even close. Everybody's there for a different reason. I'll tell you what you don't do, is you don't throw a hand grenade into a concentrated problem and spread that problem all over hither and yon throughout the entire county, so that your city and your city and your city then has to deal with it. This is really, to me, a county issue. That's why I'm running for county supervisor. I run for senator, I'm not running for city hall. County supervisors are the social workers of the community, and they're supposed to work with the cities, and they're supposed to work with charitable organizations, nonprofits, churches, because I see the Catholic Church with a huge presence down there. And there's going to be a different fit and fix for every person down there. It starts with housing. A lot of them, as I mentioned, do not want to go to shelters, can't go to shelters. Some of them, and you can tell, because their areas are very neat and organized, and literally there's a couple of white picket fences around some of the tents and so forth. Those are the folks who got caught up in the recession. Like, Joe, just give me a break. Just help me with a car, help me with a driver's license, help me with a shower, help me with a little dignity, I think would go a long ways. But it's not going to be fixed overnight. It's not going to be fixed by one human being. It's going to take a community effort to say, all right, we're building houses for these groups because they're going to go to the housing. Some of these people want the shelter. Some of these people just want a plane ticket back home because they have a family network and they have no ability to get there. The first thing I do is set up, like we used to do in the fire service, a unified command. There's already some task forces out there, and say, let's fund this problem. The other side of that is, the county isn't spending the money. I met with the CEO, Frank Kim, of the County of Orange, and he says, look, my hands are tied by the Board of Supervisors, or they're tied by this organization or that. Let's untie some hands and get some work done.
Well, you know that Todd Spitzer came to the Anaheim City Council and spouted that they have $750 million.
Right.
And they're sitting on it.
Plus the healthcare money.
Right.
Yes, and that is exactly the problem. Met with Tom Daly, and he goes, Joe, the state gave the county money to deal with the problem. Spend the money. And as I first mentioned when we started, we're spending more money trying not to fix the problem than we would if we just spent the money to fix the problem. And I'll tell you something else that's going to happen. You saw what happened in Fullerton a few years ago. You get men and women in law enforcement who aren't trained mental health providers. It's not their fault. And you get into a situation where you're going to have a confrontation. It's not going to be pretty. You'll spend more money in lawsuits to fix it the wrong way than if you would just spent the money to fix it the right way to begin with. Yes, sir, you had your hand.
Yeah, I know that in the district that you're running in, there's not a lot of residential housing that I mean, aside from the cities, and you don't have jurisdiction over some of that housing. Like you have unincorporated islands, for example, where there's housing, okay? But there's going to be an attempt to put on the ballot later this year, I believe it's in the signature gathering phase, to repeal the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act of 1995, which basically imposed limits on and banned rent control on any properties made after 1995. In addition to that, it also bans rent control on single-family housing. Well, let me just make one comment about single-family housing. It used to be one time that people who own single-family housing used to be homeowners. Now large corporations are buying thousands of homes, okay? And they're making cookie-cutter arrangements. Basically, the rents are almost the same, and they'll raise the rents all at the same time. And the question I wanted to ask you is, what do you think of rent? Again, I know that the Board of Supervisors has some limitations, because you don't have any authority of rent control like cities of Anaheim. You do have in certain unincorporated sections where there's housing, okay? What is your opinion of rent control?
Well, you know, my family grew up in Brooklyn under rent control. My great-grandparents owned tenement buildings in Brooklyn before the Depression, and they lost everything in the Depression. And I know from listening to my family. My dad's family came from Ireland, my mom's family came from Italy. There's two sides to rent control, and if you do it, you gotta do it right. My grandfather living in a rent control building, paid $200 a month a day, died. They stopped fixing the elevators, so then it becomes a 10-story walk-up. So when your firefighters arrive, they walk up 10 flights of stairs, leaking pipes, rat infestation, and so forth. So there has to be some sense of balance. I'm not an expert on the law you just read. I will look it up. I'm not an expert. I can only tell you what I've seen. There's two sides to it. On one side, we need affordable housing because at minimum wage, you cannot afford to live in Orange County. That's it. You can't. And on the other side of that, if we do some type of rent control, then what do you do to that community? What do you do to that neighborhood? What do you do to those parks if you don't have the money for the upkeep, for the basic sanitation, if that makes sense? I'm not an expert on that, but I'll tell you what, I will look into it. Yes, sir.
Yeah, my question, every day I go in the other cities, they're building more lofts and more urbane-ish, I mean, they're doing it right here, reconstruction. I know that's puts a lot, it needs to kind of look good, yes, and it puts a lot of pressure on the owners having to spend more, but they used to come to our homes and say, oh, look at that little brown spot on your, look at your trash cans, look over the fence. And now, because of the water thing, there could be dead lawns and it's okay, but I'm looking at these new lofts, whatever they want to call them, apartments, and they're just growing, but who's gonna live in those? And as it seems we're losing jobs and people are in the riverbed, why are these empty places all over? It looks like somebody's gonna come in and have a big party here, like, but I can't live in there, I don't make that money.
Well, if you look at the lofts of the triangle, you're looking at $2,200 a month for a studio, right?
That's right.
And they come our waters, they tell us that we have to save water, trash, there's too much traffic. Now, if everybody fill those places up?
So, and Irvine's looking at density, Irvine's outside the district, but when Irvine goes for density, Orange County, you look at all of our recessions going back, we've had, 5 since 1980? And you look at the building industry, and they're the ones who usually pull us. We usually go into recession before anybody else in the country, and then we usually come out of recession before anybody else in the country. And it's usually because the building industry and the trade unions and the trade groups start building and doing development and redevelopment. And you're gonna see a lot of communities going vertical because we only have 750 square miles, and we're backed up to the Cleveland. 750 square miles is not that big of an area for over 3 million people. And you're right about the community. If you fix the housing problem and increase density, then hey Joe, how are we gonna get to work when you can't even get on the roadway and the freeway? And the 91's a parking lot, and I was talking to Wes before we started, in the early 70s, in my dad's Plymouth Fury, you get on the 91 and not see a car for a full minute. Now, it was a stage 2 smog alert, you couldn't see any cars next to you, but you wouldn't see a car for a while. Now it's a parking lot. You might as well be out there selling Starbucks along the freeway. There has to be a sense of balance on regional planning, because we're also pushing out. And I see it from a public safety perspective, because I see firefighters who are now living out in the desert area, in Apple Valley and in Victorville, and that's their commute to work. We've got firefighters who live out of state, and they come into California, they'll work 10 days in a row, 15 days in a row. My kid brother works 22 days in a row for the state of California Fire Department, and then when he's off duty, they send him to his firehouse, and then he's back on a fire for 22 days in a row. And when they transfer him, they'll transfer him to a job 5 hours away. There needs to be a sense of balance and regionalization. And one hand isn't talking to the other hand. The people are building the housing, they say they are, but they're not necessarily talking to people who build the freeways. And when they do, we're 5 years behind the curve. They just opened up the 91 HOA, and our firefighters live in Murrieta and Temecula. They make that drive now. It's $10 each way. And it saves them an hour driving. The day after they announced the opening of that, the Inland Empire announced that they're going to be starting construction on 100,000 new homes. So what did we do? What did we do? Yes, sir.
Probably just a couple of quick statements rather than questions. The 1% is still taking what the 99% gives them. Because I know the people that are building, they're building apartments, the people that are building the houses, people buying the houses are not the ones that are renting them. They're being rented by us again at 60%. But that aside, when you talk about building and expanding, is there ever a problem with ADA? Not that I'm opposed to ADA in the aid of those handicapped people, but couldn't an ADA non-compliance extend the money that we had to build with, extend the need, the floor space that's used for those families that you need, and by that dropping the cost of each individual piece of, each individual unit or apartment or house you're gonna call it. So I mean, those are things that take a lot of money. I mean, they're useful, don't get me wrong.
Well, if you remember, I mean, that was President Reagan who snuck ADA in last minute and surprised everybody, and half the country was applauding, and the other half was just saying, okay, now what do I do with my remodel? You know, again, it's a sense of balance. It really is, and there needs to be a conversation from the community groups, from the nonprofits, from the church groups, from leaders like everybody in this room, to your city council, to your county, to your state, to the Fed. And that isn't going on. A lot of the reason why it's not going on is I'm blue, they're red, you know, I'm left, they're right, whatever it happens to be. But when stuff's on fire, everybody gets along. Nobody cares who you voted for President of the United States. We now have a crisis. And it's not a crisis just dealing with one issue, because, you know, sometimes the road to hell is paved with good intentions. You fix one thing, and you better be careful you don't break two other things. So I'm just looking at a conversation, a task force, where local and county and state community leaders will get together and have a voice in fixing the problems, but the county has to play the lead, the county has to be in charge, and the county has to fund it, and that's why I'm running for county supervisor.
Yes, you were just, yes, real quick answers. You said Central Command, as you were speaking about the
Yes,
task
sir.
force and that
Yes,
for
sir.
homeless, right?
Yes, and there are some of those task forces already
How many
established.
entities, well, how many entities are there? I know if you get a Marine platoon and a Army platoon and Navy SEALs, somebody's gonna command all of them, even though they're different
Right.
factions. Is that going on too with the help of the homeless? Are there different factions that are no way have a head, if you will, of a command?
Yeah, honestly, and then we're gonna get on the road. It's not so much as somebody being in charge, as much as other people getting the heck out of the way. And I think that's what the problem is right now, is people going down the riverbed for a photo op, but then they're not really interested in solving the problem. And to solve the problem,
Right.
you gotta roll up your sleeves, and you gotta get immersed in it. Like I said, I was wrong when I went down there. It is very complex, and they have rights, they know their rights, and they're human beings, and they want to be treated with dignity. It's not so much as being one person in charge as everybody else just getting the red tape out of the way.
Is it a situation that can be put under?
Yeah, because we're there. Because unless and until we recognize and accept the fact that it is a crisis and it's a human crisis of the highest proportion we've seen in Orange County, and if you don't fix it now, it'll be 10 times worse 10 years from now. It's not going away. And sometimes it's a symptom of society. We look at the things that we have in our community, it's a symptom of society going across the nation. And a lot of the folks who come down here, some of them will tell you, well, Joe, I grew up here in Orange County. I worked at Knoxville Farm when I was a kid. And some of them will tell you, I came in here because from another state because of the rehab treatment I was getting, and the money ran out. Now we just need to get back home. So we're gonna need a lot of people pulling, but you can't do anything without the funds. Last question, I'll get on the road. Did you have one more?
I'll give someone else.
Wes, you have one more, sir?
Just a statement, don't use the, some people need a flight out of here
Yeah.
thing anymore, because every city in Orange County and the county too is using a program called Coast to Coast, where that is a primary thing.
I know.
It's the first thing they hit them
Right.
with. It's not that this isn't being offered.
Right.
So
And-
they call that greyhound therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Greyhound
Yeah.
bus.
Well,
And then they
Right.
consider, oh, we've taken one person off the street, and they can put a little slot down, that, oh, this is, look at what we.
And that-
Street exit.
and-
Even
Street
San
exit.
Antonio.
Yeah.
And what
yeah.
you just mentioned is exactly what I heard from the county, is they thought was a remedy. So I went down there to test it. So I took what the county leaders told me, and I went down to the riverbed, and I said, this is what they're telling me they're offering you. And a lot of them say, okay, that doesn't really do it for me, because where am I gonna fly to? One or two people did say, one or two, not a lot. I didn't know that. I do have family. Who do I get in touch with to get that done?
That's the problem, it works out in a tiny.
But a lot
cases
of
and
people
then
are from here.
Most of them I talk to have roots here in Orange County, and they could tell you where they grew up in Orange County. Yes, ma'am?
Yes, I think some of this has to do with the mind frame of, let's say, Americans or all of us, where people want individual homes and this and that, and we have to change to embrace other people, even our family members. I was in Beijing about 2 months ago in China. I was very, very impressed with the number of skyscrapers. I mean hundreds, miles of nothing but skyscrapers. My question is, how do people get up and down? But we asked the tour guide, we don't see any homeless people. And they said, well, our government, if they see you're homeless, we contact the family and say, this is your responsibility.
Right.
Then we said, and then they said, if we see a person out again on the streets, there are places for them. So they don't leave people. The whole society embraces everybody. You belong to somebody.
So if I were to cut through the mindset, because I said my wife's Korean, and basically the oldest son is a social security network for mom and dad.
Yeah.
And here I think we look at us and them.
Yeah.
And there they look at us.
And
And we
they're
need to look
ours.
at us a lot more. By the grace of God go I. I've seen my firefighters living in cars. You know, remember we were paid $5 a day when I started. I've seen my firefighters, one lived in a dumpster. I've seen my own guys who I thought we were doing okay. You know, nobody went to Europe, I'll tell you that. Maybe not so much Disneyland anymore. It's a little expensive. But I think you're right. I think you hit it on the head. We need to change the mindset. There is no us and them. It's just us. And if we can do that, then maybe we're taking a step in the right direction, right? Thank you so much for allowing me to be here today. I appreciate it very much.